We'll dive back into things. So now that we've talked about the different roles and that people have and the ways in which we can collaborate, we're going to dive into some of the examples of multi-benefit projects to really see these into action. So I'd like to introduce Jason Muley, General Manager of the Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. Jason, you can go ahead and take it away.
Can you hear me? Okay. And share. Okay, can you guys see, can you see the PowerPoint slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my name's Jason Muley. I'm the general manager at Riverside Flood. I've been with the Flood Control District for about 25 years now, and started out as a junior engineer right out of college, and I've been the general manager now for about 5 years. And so let me see here, make sure these slides are forwarding. So one of the things that was important to me when I first started at the district was to make sure our mission and vision really truly reflected what our goals were for our community. And as a flood control district, we manage stormwater, and that means all the rainwater that comes down out of the sky. It's our job to safely convey that runoff through the community, and also to make sure we're putting that rainwater to the highest and best use that we can. And so about 5 years ago, we updated our mission to reflect that it's not only our job to manage stormwater for the sake of stormwater, managing stormwater, but also to manage it to ensure we're providing for safe, sustainable, and livable communities. That our goal is to integrate our projects into the community, to the betterment of the community. And when we updated our vision, we also reflected that at the very last phrase in our vision statement, which is ensure our projects have a high return value to our community. And that's to make sure that our projects provide the best bang for the buck to our community possible. Again, with a focus on managing stormwater, but by also looking for opportunities to work with partners to put that same land to as many different uses as we reasonably could. And so just a little bit about our district. We were formed in 1945 after the floods of 1938. I'll show some pictures of those in a second. And our primary purpose, we're at our core a siloed agency that's responsible for managing stormwater. We're a flood control district. Now, our flood control district only covers the western 2,700 miles of Riverside County, and so roughly from Palm Springs west. And the reason for that is there were some pretty significant floods in the 1916s and 1918s that led to a formation of an earlier flood control district for the Coachella Valley. And that earlier flood control district ended up becoming integrated into the Coachella Valley Water District. And so if you know, folks who live out in the Coachella Valley area, their flood control needs are for the most part served by Coachella Valley Water District, with the exception of parts of Desert Hot Springs, Palm Springs, and Cathedral City. And so most people don't think of flooding in Riverside County or think of us as you know, we're dry 360 days out of the year, some years more. But we do have bouts of very serious floods, often driven by atmospheric rivers. Mm-hmm. In 1938, we had one of the most significant floods of record, the Santa Ana River flood. In March, the Santa Ana River was flowing at the same rate as the Mississippi River at St. Louis. You know, on a normal day, you can't even see the river, but in 1938, it looked just like the Mississippi, and it caused a lot of significant damage to our communities. In 1969, we had another fairly significant atmospheric river event come through the county, and that led to the floods of '69. These are some pretty dramatic pictures of the Van Buren Bridge, which was destroyed by those floodwaters on the Santa Ana River. About another 10 years later, we had the floods of 1980. That was another significant flooding year. And unfortunately, in 1980, there was an Army Corps of Engineers levee that protected the city of San Jacinto, and that levee was overtopped and gave way, which led to flooding of parts of the city of San Jacinto. And these are just some photos of that flooding event that resulted from that Army Corps levee failure. In 1993, had another fairly significant storm that led to, that storm focused more on the southwest portion of the county, and that led to flooding along Marietta Creek and put parts of Old Town Temecula 3 feet underwater. In 2005, we had another storm event come through, again, kind of focused on the Santa Ana watershed. And that storm event led to it was very interesting because the Santa Ana River ended up migrating. Most people think the Santa Ana River is a fairly stable river stream. Well, in 2005, the river ate a half-mile of riverbank and ended up taking out a home and almost took out a sewer line. And so those were, these rivers, these systems, they go years and years and years being relatively quiet, relatively benign, but when we have these major floods, they can become active, and they do what rivers and streams do. And then in 2013, we had a very active thunderstorm season, and had a major thunderstorm hit downtown Riverside, dropped, I think, on the order of 4 or 5 inches of rain and caused a lot of flooding. Someone took a very nice shot of that thunderstorm from up by Big Bear. You can see in the middle of this photo. And then in 2019, we had a 200-year storm, a very serious atmospheric river that unfortunately followed the Holy Fire and basically led to mud and debris flows and other effects coming down off the Santa Ana Mountains and into the community because of the combination of a post-burn damaged watershed and a very significant storm. And so our district's job is to try to mitigate and manage those events and try to minimize the impacts that future flood events have on our community. We're primarily funded by ad valorem property taxes. So when you pay your property tax each year, the 1% you pay, a small fraction of that comes to our flood control district. And that in total generates about $65 million, closer to $70 million now in total revenues that we then use to deliver stormwater management infrastructure. And to date, we've delivered about $1 billion worth of infrastructure, over 700 miles of storm drains, channels, and levees, and 61 dams and detention basins through the western part of Riverside County. And our agency is very unique, and one of the things we're very proud of is that we have about 240 staff. But the reality is about 70% of our revenues go out as capital projects, and only about 30% of our revenues are for staffing and overhead. And so we really try to focus on keeping our dollars going out as projects, protecting our community. And the types of projects we build, and we're probably most well known for, things like storm drains, concrete channels, and other forms of channels that you can see throughout the community. Levees like the Santa Ana River levees that you see on the edge of downtown Riverside or hiking Mount Rubidoux. And then dams. So there's a number of dams in Riverside. Sometimes you don't even know they're there. The Sycamore Dam, which is shown here, which is at the intersection of Central and Chicago. It's just kind of nestled back from that intersection, but there's a very large dam there that protects a portion of Riverside County. And one thing I always like to point out to people is people assume that since we are the flood control district, that we are responsible for providing all of the flood protection to Western Riverside County, but that's really not true. Our role is to provide for the large regional systems that provide protection to our communities at a community level. And so we build the big storm drains, the big dams, the big channels. The smaller infrastructure, like the infrastructure you might see going under a road, a culvert under a road, or even the drainage that's interior to tracks when you see the catch basins in the tracks, those are typically managed by the local jurisdictions. And so the city and the county tend to maintain a lot of the smaller infrastructure as part of their road maintenance activities. And then what really tends to surprise people is that they assume that if there's a natural stream, that our flood control district will don't have control of that and own it and operate it. But the reality is that uh, a lot of the natural stream systems, these smaller little streams, are actually private property owned by the people who own they'll have a house and they can have a stream running through their backyard. And in these photos here, you can see these little green belts. Those are stream systems that basically are running through private property. And if you buy a property with a stream course in it, then you are an owner of that stream course and then have responsibility for it. So that's just a little background about who we are and what we do. What I want to talk about now is the evolution of our flood control district. When our district first started, we were very much about building efficient systems, and the most efficient system you can build is a concrete channel. And so concrete channels are very durable, they're very long lasting, but they're not the prettiest system, and they're not compatible always with our community's vision for how they want the community to look. And so, this is a picture of a concrete channel in an industrial area, but if this was running through someone's backyard in a residential area, it wouldn't feel right. And so over the course of the past 10 or 15 years, we've been evolving towards looking at building more greenbelt infrastructure. And so this is an example of another channel in Wolf Creek. It's in Temecula. But this channel is designed to kind of serve as a paseo in a park that's available to the community for use. And this is a much more pleasant feature. It's a much more environmentally sensitive feature, but it doesn't come free. And I think that's important to understand it when we talk about these things about promoting more natural systems-based management, that there is a cost to that. And one of the costs of that is that it takes is about 3 times as much right of way to convey water in a natural greenbelt channel than it does in a concrete channel. And so, a lot of our communities and our elected officials understand that trade-off, and they choose to make that trade-off. But you have to understand, when you're making these decisions, there are trade-offs and you have to balance them. But these trade-offs do produce systems that are more environmentally friendly and generally can be better integrated into the community and serve more uses for the community. So this isn't only a flood control channel, it's also a paseo, it's also a green belt, it's also someplace where when it's not raining, the community can enjoy. And our efforts to promote kind of a more multi-purpose, multi-benefit type of project to our community don't only include looking at greenbelt channels. We also are actively working with our cities and our parks district to integrate trails. So a lot of our channels have access roads. We're now working to convert those access roads to also serve as trails, like on the Santa Ana River Bike Trail. We're also we have basins that store water. We're working with the cities and the county to look for opportunities to have those basins serve as parks. And so this is a picture of Harada Park in Eastvale. And you can see here, this is a beautiful ball field, looks great. When we had those storms in 2018, this is what that park looked like. It turned into a flood control facility that stored water so that we could safely convey it through the community downstream. And when it rains, this basin can fill up with water. It takes about 24 hours for it to drain out. And then once it drains out, the city parks department comes in and they basically reset the park, and it's back up functioning as ball fields and for community enjoyment in a couple days typically. But in the old world, this would have just been a big brown hole in the wall. Now we're getting multiple benefits out of it. It's a park 360 days out of the year or 350 days out of the year. And then somewhere between 5 and 15 days out of the year, it serves a flood control purpose. And that's a much better use of the land. But when you're thinking about multi-purpose projects, you also have to know going into it that you actually want to integrate more than one purpose into the project. When we did the Harada project, we knew going into it that it was going to be a park. And so we designed the basin so it had flat side slopes so that people could go up and down them. We designed the basin so that the low flows would generally route around the park. And so it would minimize the impacts of flooding on the park when we didn't need to impact the park. When we try to retrofit uses in after the fact, it's much more challenging to be successful. And so this is a picture of another park in Riverside. It's the Don Durr Park off of Monroe. And this is also a flood control basin. But when it rains, there's no low flow management here because it was a retrofit. And so here you get a lot of sediment that comes in from the upstream area, which is more agricultural. It's part of the old orange preserves. And so this park is much harder to reset than the park in Eastvale, which was designed from the ground up to be a dual use facility. We also work with our local water districts. Sometimes basins can serve different roles. If we're over a groundwater basin and we have good soils beneath the project that connect the surface to the groundwater, then we also look at trying to conserve stormwater. We can capture that stormwater and infiltrate it into the ground and basically store it in the groundwater basins for the water districts to use as part of their local supply. So we can enhance the local supply and reduce reliance on imported water. And so the district also works with our local water districts when we're building new basins to say, hey, we're putting a basin in over here. Is there an opportunity to try to capture stormwater? Or maybe the water district has access to imported supplies that they can't always use in a given year. Sometimes they'll want to try to store the water here and then recharge it here because otherwise they lose it. So we work with the local water districts to also look for opportunities to use our facilities to enhance our local water supplies. And we have a number of projects we're working on. We work with Eastern, with Western, Lake Hemet Municipal Water District, Beaumont Cherry Valley, the cities of Corona and Riverside. We're always looking for ways to make sure that our projects can benefit the community beyond just their stormwater purpose, their intended primary purpose. We also work with the cities and the counties to promote low impact development. Low impact development projects basically are a way of dealing with new land use development. And so if you're going to do a new residential development, classically there's a lot of impervious area, there's a lot of asphalt, there could be a lot of parking. But if you think about it a different way, there's a way to have that development function more like nature by using things like porous pavements that allow the water to seep through the pavement instead of running off the pavement, by integrating green belts into the community. And so we work with our local water agencies to look for ways to make our developments more environmentally friendly as well, and share standards with them so that they can pursue that low impact development design standard successfully if they choose. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk very quickly about homeless encampments. Homeless really like to live in, I don't know if they like to live, but they find it convenient to live in our rivers, like the Santa Ana River, and in our storm drains. And part of that is they're out of sight. And so they're generally not in the face of the community as much. So they get hassled less in these locations. And also gives them some privacy and allows them to do certain things that maybe they couldn't do if they were living more in the core of the city. But these encampments have a lot of negative side effects, and we really wish sometimes that the encampments maybe would look more like this, where they were more contained and generally better kept. But a lot of times what we see is something more like what we see on the left side here, where we see a lot of trash associated with the encampments. And sometimes that trash isn't just trash, it's needles, it's human waste, it's chemical wastes. And those wastes are in our waterways and in areas that are trying to preserve and protect endangered species, or they're in areas where they're really putting themselves at risk by living in an area that's known to flood. And so one of the things we're working on now is trying to partner with our local land use agencies, trying to partner with the sheriff and code enforcement and others to try to find a better way to try to manage homeless. And the county's really taking a leadership role on that. And we're working very closely with them, because unfortunately, a lot of times what we find ourselves doing is if we come in, work with social services, try to remove a homeless encampment, try to get them sited in housing. They refuse the housing, we clean out the encampment, and then either they'll move back in a couple weeks later, or they just move on to the next location, to the next city. And so I think we're all working towards a better, more holistic way to help the homeless. And it's particularly important in these flood control areas because the risks they pose to themselves, the risks they pose to the environment, and the risks they can cause for the community. And so just a couple closing thoughts on how to make multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects work. You know, you really have to have this mindset of wanting to maximize the value of your projects to the community. Because if you're going to do multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects, they're going to take longer because more people have to coordinate. And from an individual agency perspective, they can cost incrementally more. If I'm designing a basin to be a park or a water conservation feature, it's going to end up being slightly larger than if it was just a basin for flood control purposes. But if you're looking at the long term, the fact that you can put that land in multiple uses actually probably ends up as a cost savings in the long run for the community. Plus, you're accelerating benefits to the community. Community's getting a park and a trail and a basin now up front, as opposed to a basin now and maybe a park at another location at another date. And as I mentioned before, it's good to know if you're going to do multi-purpose up front because it will affect how you approach a project. And so our flood control district now, every project we pursue, we reach out to the local city, we reach out to the local parks district, we reach out to the local water agency to see if they have an interest in partnering with us on that project so that we know up front if we need to think about multi-purpose in our design. And sometimes they say, yes, we're interested and we want to partner with you now. And sometimes they say, we're interested, but we don't have the money to partner now. But if you could make it work, that would be great. And so knowing that up front allows us to make decisions that make it work in the long run. And then the other thing we do when we do multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects is we collaborate. And so if I'm going to do a park project, a basin in a park, I don't take on the parks rules. My act doesn't allow me to do that. We'll enter into an agreement with a parks agency that says, hey, we're expert in flood control, and so we're going to manage the flood control aspects of this project. And you as a parks district, you're expert in managing parks, and so you're going to manage the parks district, the parks aspect of the project. And we've done that on many, many projects now, and it works well because it kind of keeps people in their lanes. It keeps people doing what they do well. But instead of having separate silos, we're partnering together and working together to make a better outcome for the community. And then lastly, you be open to discussion and understand why you do things. Because when you're doing multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects, there's a good chance you're going to start finding that your standards don't accommodate it. And so you need to understand why you have the standards. Why do you require this? Because it could be that there's an alternate way to get there, or it could be it was for a very specific situation, which may not apply. And so it's always good to know where you're coming from and why you do things the way you do them, so that you can better work with partners on multi-purpose projects. And so with that, just a quick slide to share my contact information. Should you have any questions, the phone number is for my assistant who can help get you in touch with me. And lastly, I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys may have.
Thanks so much, Jason. As a reminder, you can chat your questions into the Q&A box. I have some coming directly to me, so we'll start with those. First of all, Jason, what, in your experience, what has been the biggest barrier to collaboration?
Sometimes it's getting your partner agency to pay attention to your inquiry when it comes in. And so, you know, all of our agencies we have our primary mission, we have our budgets, we've got our capital improvement plans, and we're really laser focused on implementing those. And so sometimes when we send a query across to another agency, if it's not something that's on their immediate horizon or immediate radar, they don't really think it through and they don't always respond back. And so that's a challenge. And then also just being open to the collaboration and understanding that making multi-benefit work means making accommodations. And so having people who are open to those accommodations, which is that why I was pointing that last bullet, know why you do things so that when you get asked questions, you can understand where flexibility lies to be able to promote these kind of dual use outcomes.
Absolutely. And building on that, have you seen how the pandemic has affected that type of collaboration, either for better or for worse?
I can't say that I've seen, I can't say that I've seen a huge difference um, in our partnerships and promoting or not promoting. And maybe to be honest with you, maybe it's made things a little easier because it's easier to get meetings because you don't have to drive everywhere. You just hop on Zoom and away you go. But I would say it has been net neutral and maybe slightly positive, just because it's in some ways it can be easier to get a hold of people and have meetings. So.
Next question, what is being done preemptively to coordinate agency program policies, et cetera, instead of being reactive on a project by project basis?
So our district is actively engaged. We're doing it at multiple levels. Our district has been very actively engaged in the IRWIMP programs, and so SAPA's OWOW program. We actively participate in those efforts so that we can share our plans and make sure others are aware of what we're doing, so we can identify those partnership opportunities. Our district also develops what are known as master drainage plans, which are kind of like the general plan for flood control. And so when we're developing our master drainage plans or updating our master drainage plans, we make sure to engage our partner agencies so that they can see our vision for the community and we can see their vision for the community, and we can merge those as best we can. And then on a project by project basis, we also, as I mentioned earlier, every project we pursue here at the district, we reach out to our potential partners to make them aware that we're pursuing the project and to look for that opportunity for a multi-benefit, multi-purpose outcome. And so we're actively reaching out and pinging our partners so they know we're here, they know what we're up to, and we're sharing information. And I can say I've seen similar efforts from the water districts and from the cities. I think we're all getting better about trying to collaborate and pay attention to what each other's doing so we can deliver better outcomes for the community.
We have a question about how to coordinate a Parks and Open Space Master Plan we need an update to the master plan of drainage to include incorporating trails and flood right-of-way. Do you have suggestions for coordinating the two?
Well, first thing is reach out to me at the phone number, the 951-955-1250, and I'll help get you connected with our planning department. But generally what we would do is if you have if there is a trails master plan and you're looking at integrating portion of your trails into our flood control facilities, our planning department would work with you to develop what we would call a master agreement that would recognize where those opportunities are possible and recognize an intent to utilize those facilities for trails, and then have a mechanism by which, as elements of a trail are ready to be actually turned on, completed, that we could integrate that use into our facility. And so we don't always have to update our master drainage plan to incorporate the trails use, but we do have a mechanism through agreements that we take to our board where we can recognize it, address it, and implement it over time. So.
Great. I think we have time for just one or two more questions. The next one I'll go to is, what can we do to ensure that multi-benefit projects such as Greenway Basin flood management features are installed in low income or underinvested communities as opposed to new development or wealthier communities?
And so I think that's one of the things I'm actually most proud of from our district's perspective and our board's approach to the district is that for the most part, the development pays its own way. And so when a new development comes in and they have flooding issues, that developer is going to be required to pay for and address the flooding issues consistent with the requirements of the local land use plan or the general plan by the county or the city, and to our standards. And so generally the developers will be held to a standard already just by the Subdivision Map Act that requires them to consider and integrate these types of low impact development, green belts, so on and so forth type projects. The district tends to focus on the older communities. And so a lot of our revenues go to retrofitting the older communities that were developed before we really fully understood what the drainage needs are. And so areas like Good Hope and Mead Valley and the unincorporated county, portions of Paris, that's where you'll see the district spending its money and trying to integrate projects with that same mindset of maximum benefit, multi-purpose, multi-use. And so we end up being the entity that works with those unincorporated areas, or those low impact, lower income areas, to provide the flood protection and the partnership opportunities for the other agencies to join with us when we're moving our projects forward.
I'll close with the final question that just maybe why a lot of people are here today is, what role do elected officials have in playing in advancing multi-benefit projects and promoting collaboration?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the elected officials are responsible for setting the vision and the overarching policy for the jurisdictions that they manage. And your staff will respond to that vision and that policy. And so in as much as you're setting clear vision and clear policy that you're looking for multi-purpose, you're looking for multi-benefit, that's a priority for you, that will help drive that down to the staff level and promote those types of outcomes. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do is when your general plan comes up for review, when you're setting other policies and ordinances, ask the question: how are we promoting multi-purpose, multi-benefit projects that provide benefits to our community, and work with your staff to integrate that vision into those documents and plans.
I'm actually going to sneak one more question in just because we have a minute, and it's a great question. Also bringing up the crisis for affordable housing. How do we include that into water solutions? Cities are mandated by SCAG for the 6th cycle RENA process. How do we integrate affordable housing with the water?
It's a very good and challenging question, because it's, like I said, in California, we have a lot of mandates that drive up the cost of housing, and probably the best thing we can do as local agencies is to be well integrated in our approach to delivering housing, so that we can minimize the cost to the development community for delivering it, and can help control the costs that our residents are paying for housing, especially in low-income areas.
Well, I want to give you a huge thank you, Jason. We really appreciate your time.
No, thank you. I appreciate doing this, and I hope this was helpful. So thank you.